Yes, so great, thank you. Just how we can bring in the right narrative of Hinduism to youngsters and our future generations today. Bring in the right narrative. Yeah, exactly. So the right narrative, I mean, it's quite a challenge to get the right narrative. There's a lot of argumentation about like, fine, if Hindu civilization was invaded by Mughals, well then Hindus are probably just the previous occupying empire, just like everyone else. It's pretty tough for people. It seems to be pretty tough for people to see past that. Even just mostly Swamiji revealing and repeating enough times that the living gurus like Adi Shankara and so on, living peace and Buddha and Krishna and Lord Ram, just being the embodiment of peace, it proves that that's the foundation and that they are referencing Vedas Agamas, that's the foundation. So yeah, so the right narrative, yeah, definitely. Like Mangalamaj is saying, yeah, it has to be told. And the thing is, you know, we're told 100,000 times. The amount of violence that an adult sees, like, versus the amount of violence that an adult commits is very less. It's like the amount of violence that we're exposed through media. No one we know is ever committing that much violence. So it's just a completely unnecessary amount of violence. Like, no, you know, essentially no one we know is committing heinous crimes and rapes and murders. But the amount of times we see that by the time you're 30, 40 years old, like, that's completely unnecessary. So yeah, so it's kind of like, as Hindus, we just have to see, like, okay, is this the kind of world we want our kids growing up in? And then if we want something different, I mean, it's just sort of, there is a way to do it. But definitely that narrative is like, it's pretty much entirely lost. It's definitely, and I mean, obviously not mainstream. So yeah, and that's the thing for future generations. That's the question. Like, to say now, you know, that if Hindus in India are feeling Hinduism is okay, you know, that's one way to say it. But the fact is, right, our children are not being taught Vedic tradition schools. Generally not at all. It's illegal to do so in public schools. And generally afraid, as we spoke earlier, about the social legitimacy of Sanatana Hindu Dharma being destroyed. Kids are afraid to even wear a dhoti or kumkum, let alone knowing why they would want to do that. So yeah, it's just kind of like, yeah, what ecosystem, what environment are kids going to grow up in? They're going to grow up in the chaos of the violent societies that we're living in, inundated by the poisonous food and violent media, and following the thought currents of the violent society, and not living as, you know, not living as enlightened masters, and treating the temple as, you know, sort of like a church you go to once a week or once a month, and you offer puja as a short arti for a minute or two before you go to work. So yeah, how can we bring the narrative of Hinduism to youngsters and future generations? Yeah, there's a lot of work that has to be done. A big part of it, yeah, like even in Rhinoshan is saying, yeah, we just have to, Hindus have to want to do it. Like, sort of like, it's not going to, like, when there's no state that declares itself as a Hindu state, then there's no laws that are going to make Hinduism grow. It's like there's there's something on the order of 40,000 temples in the state of Tamil Nadu. And so the amount of land that is owned by the temples and the amount of buildings, there's something like 26,000 buildings. And so the amount of land and buildings that are owned just by a low, like this, T.R. Ramesh is a sort of well-known lawyer, and he was sharing these facts that the amount of rent, just low rent that those properties should get from Tamil Nadu should be about $1 billion. Something like 6,500 crore. But what's coming out of it through HRNC essentially is only about 200 crore, or like $30 million. So $1 billion should be growing the Hindu ecosystem in Tamil Nadu. But the governing body, HRNC, secular governing body, is only realizing 200 crore or 30 million from that. And a lot of it is even siphoned off to projects that are not at all related to Hinduism. Sometimes even road building projects we see in states like Andhra Pradesh. So that's the thing, right? As long as there's no laws, if there's no laws that are, that are protecting Hindu kids, that we should grow an like the thing is, if an ecosystem's not growing, it's shrinking. It's not staying, like nothing is staying exactly the same. Either it's growing or it's shrinking. So if we're not using that $1 billion, right, to enrich that state and our children, it's the shrinking ecosystem. So that's the thing. If we don't have laws, if we don't have a legal system that protects you and encourages you and allows this $1 billion to flow, then it comes out as $30 million only. That's a massive loss. $970 million lost. That's a big loss to Hindus. And that's just one state. There's 12,000 temples in Tamil Nadu that can't afford one puja per day. So we have a lot of temples, but they're not doing puja. And on top of that, kids are not going to the temple. And if they are, it's only once a week, for example. So what do we expect? Where are we living, right? In what ecosystem are we living? The parents are spending the 8 hours a day out at working a job, and the kids are spending 8 hours at a secular school. Then that's the bulk of our life and the bulk of our time. But that's the thing is, because even with the coronavirus situation, people see that, oh, the system is not safe. The whole thing can be turned on its head and I get exploited. And so really people start to ask, well, what's the purpose then? If this whole thing is fake and it can fall down, then what's the purpose? Why am I here? And so then you start to look for, well, what are the other options? How do other humans live? And if you go into history and say, was there any civilization that wasn't just predicated on this sort of false economic system that can be turned on its head and destroyed in an instant, and I don't have access to food? Like, is there any other way that humans have ever lived? And the thing is, it's pretty hard for even Hindus to even recognize that there was a Vedic civilization that was based in nonviolence, that used the Jati Varna system to prevent this economic exploitation of classes. That's why it was there. It wasn't a caste exploitative system of people. It was a system set up to make sure classes don't exploit each other. For people to see that narrative amongst all the plethora of sort of distracting and attacking media, it's almost impossible. So yeah, we need a legal system set up.
Earlier, I had made a statement saying, can join. Let me just go ahead and share a small clip which I had while listening to Shri Nithyananda. Earlier, I had made a statement saying, the right narrative, if we need to do this so that because we want the next generation to have the right narrative about Hinduism. Let me correct that statement. It's not want, it's a need. The world needs the right narrative about Hinduism. And let me tell you why. If you take the past 20 years of entertainment, of the entertainment industry, of the movies and TV shows which are being made, after some time when the hero is not generating enough interest in the consumer, stories about the hero's success is not generating enough enthusiasm and viewership. When people have started getting bored of the hero, the entertainment industry has adapted themselves to idealize the anti-hero. Basically, we are rooting, excuse me, basically, consumers will start rooting for the person who's committing the morally wrong felons and actions in the shows and in the movies. We start rooting for the person who's committing the robbery. We start rooting for the person who's committing bank robbery, or who's committing, who's trying to smuggle drugs or something like that. One side we have laws and we are telling everyone how it's wrong to indulge in drugs, how you should not go and steal a bank and so on. But the other side, this is what we give in the entertainment industry, and this is what entertainment is idealizing, especially over the past 20 years, calling it the anti-hero trope. For people who are doing the morally wrong actions, people who are questionable by their actions, by giving them feeling and taking you through their mindset, making you feel pity towards them, and making the people, the police and the judicial force, the judicial body become the enemies in the story, and the anti-hero becoming the person who everyone is idealizing and who they are rooting for. We may not be seeing the effects now, but in the future, this is very damaging to society. One side, you are telling everyone to obey the law and to follow certain rules and regulations. In the other side, you create TV shows and represent how the person who's breaking those laws are worshipped as gods and heroes in those worlds. Can you see the conflict which is happening here? On one side, we are telling them not to indulge in robbery and theft. And the other side, in entertainment, we are immortalizing a person who is successful in those things. This is why the Hindu narrative is very important. With the Hindu narrative, you will not get bored with the heroes and with the characters in the story. Because fundamentally, it is more than just right or wrong. It is about their tyaga, their sacrifice, which they did for the dharma. Even if you take the story of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, on paper and in a very broad aspect, you can say many of the things he did was morally unethical. But he did it from his space of dharma. And in accordance to that, the tyaga which he made to withhold dharma, in that aspect, you will never get bored of reading Mahabharata, and you will always be impressed. You will then start idealizing Krishna from that point on. Not just as a sweet god who plays the flute, but as a god whose planning and whose strategy is micromanagement. You'll appreciate the other aspects of Krishna as well. Rama, whatever may come, he has made so many sacrifices for withholding his dharma, for proving to the world what a true leader is and the sacrifices he needs to make. We go a little bit more further and we can take literally each and every story, each and every character in Hinduism, the stories which are immortalized in the Hindu Puranas, how those characters have made sacrifice after sacrifice and have shown the power and strength of their tyaga. It is because how the anti-hero trope is now starting to gain popularity, and people are only looking towards those kind of TV shows and movies, immortalizing people who do things which they're not supposed to do and keeping them as their heroes. When you know that people, that humanity are worshipping bank robbers, then that's when something is seriously wrong with humanity at this point. So it is for this purpose the Hindu narratives and Hindu ideals need to be brought out and need to be shown in the light of not the decision to do good or wrong, but the tyaga to stand with dharma.